Good evening, everyone. Welcome to our online Bible study. My name is Matthew. I'm the lead and teaching pastor here at Mansfield Pentecostal Church, where every Tuesday night we have a thought to think about, a question to ponder, a text to study as we do a regular online Bible study. We are continuing our Bible study series titled The New Creation Story, where we're looking at each of the books of the New Testament, gone through the Gospels, Acts, Paul's letters, Peter's letters, the book of Jude and Hebrews. And you remember that last week we started to look at the letters of John, and with the theme being of truth and love. And you recall that last week, particularly when we looked at First John, we saw the importance John placed upon the identity of Jesus, that he is fully God and fully man in one person. And this, and grasping this, holding this identity is foundational to the Christian life and to us having a relationship with God. In fact, John says in his letter that anyone who denies that Christ has come in the flesh actually has the spirit of the Antichrist. And so to not believe that Jesus is fully God and fully man in one person actually opposes us to God, and thus we can't have a relationship with God and know him as our Father. And you remember last week when we were looking at First John, that John highlights the truth that when we know, when we appreciate the identity of Jesus and have that relationship with God as our Father, it impacts our lives in two areas. Firstly, it impacts upon our conduct. We want to live our lives as those who live according to the light and don't walk in darkness. One of the characteristics of those who have a relationship with God is that they love others. You know, we don't love one another. The love of God can't be in us. And so we love because we have first been loved. But also, John highlights the truth that our relationship with God creates in us an assurance that we're forgiven, that we belong to God, that he gives us his Spirit, who bears witness of our spirit that we belong to the Father. But ultimately, it all starts in recognizing Jesus' identity as fully God and fully man in one person. And that's what we looked at last week when we're looking at First John. However, a theme that runs throughout John's letters, 1st, 2nd, and 3rd John, as I touched on earlier on, is the theme of truth and love. That as God's people, we need to be people who walk in truth and love. Truth in the absence of love becomes harsh and judgmental and critical, but love in the absence of truth, I believe, becomes weak and actually insincere and undiscerning. And so we need to have both truth and love in our life if we are to flourish and grow in our faith. And so when we look at the next two letters of 2nd John and 3rd John, we see this beautiful balance between the importance of having both truth and love. Now, both letters, 2nd John and 3rd John, are written to two different individuals. 2nd John is written to the lady. She was obviously a woman of importance, of standing. And the second and third letter, John's third letter, was written to a man by the name of Gaius, which was quite a common name in the Roman world at that time, but also appears to be someone who was an elder of a local church. And when we look at both letters, we see that both individuals had both the strengths and the weaknesses. The lady was very good on the loving side of things, but wasn't so good at discerning truth and discerning the people that she was inviting into her life who were holding to the truth. On the other hand, Gaius was pretty hot on the truth side of things and sussing out people who were speaking the truth or not, but wasn't so good at the hospitality side of things and learning to love others, and which was something that John was trying to encourage Gaius in, particularly in showing hospitality to visiting preachers who were authentic. And so when we look at both of these letters, John gives us a beautiful picture of how to get that balance right between walking in love and truth. And so in his first letter to the lady, he talks about, he brings greetings, he talks about the importance of walking in the truth and the warning about deceivers. And he encourages us, this woman, and saying, look, you're doing a great job at showing love and hospitality to people. But he says to her that you are welcoming certain individuals into your home who are actually false teachers. And you should not do that, because in doing so, you're sharing in their wicked work. And so he encourages the lady to walk in truth and to be careful who she is welcoming in to her life. On the other hand, when he's writing to Gaius, the issue isn't so much about him, his holding of the truth, but his lack of hospitality. And he actually highlights a bad example in this letter. And so the outline of this letter is as follows. He brings the greetings. He brings a commendation to Gaius. He comments on Diotrephes and Demetrius, and he brings a conclusion. And so John praises Gaius for his good works. He praises him, for him holding to the truth. He also praises a guy called Demetrius, who is well spoken of by the truth. But then he lifts up an example of someone by the name of Diotrephes, who says, this guy is very self-centered and self-serving. It's not that he isn't a false teacher, but he has a very high opinion, an overinflated opinion of his own personhood, and he fails to recognize other ministries or to give them a space in the church. And so these two letters see the importance of getting the right balance between truth and love. Okay, that if we are all love but no truth, we can be easily taken in by deceivers. But if we're all truth but no love, we can actually be very judgmental and push out the right people of our lives and act like little dictators. And so as we look at these letters, 1st, 2nd, and 3rd John, we see the responsibility for us as believers that we live our lives in line with the truth, particularly the truth of Jesus' identity as fully God and fully man in one person, but also our lives being filled with love. On the one hand, we had to watch out against false notions of Jesus, and that those who bring such false teaching are to be labeled, and they're to be identified, and they are to be rejected. But at the same time, we're also to be ongoingly growing in our love for God and for each other. And in fact, we know that John was one of the very few disciples, as I mentioned earlier on in the apostles, who actually died by natural causes. He probably died somewhere near 100 AD. And we also know that from the writings of early church writers like Jerome, that we actually have accounts of John's life just before he died that really illustrate the importance that John held and the value that John placed upon walking in truth and love. The first story recounts that as an old man, he was quite frail. He struggled with his mobility. And what happened is that the members of a local church would carry John in a chair to a local church. Of course, in those days, the church did not have buildings like the church has today. They often met in people's homes. And when John came to church on that first day of the week, and entering in corporate worship, the believers would often ask John, do you have a little message for us to share? And John would say, brothers and sisters, my little children, love one another. And then the following week, they would invite him to church again. And the believers would ask John, do you have a message for us today? And again, he would say the same thing. Little children, I say to you, love one another. And then the following Sunday, they carry John to church again, and they would ask, John, do you have a message for us? And again, his message will be the same. Little children, love one another. And of course, after a while, the believers are beginning, is John going a little bit senile? Is he getting old? Does he keep on forgetting things? And so they asked John one day, he said, John, why do you always give this message? Little children, love one another. And his response is very simple. He said this, because it is the Lord's command, and if this is done, it is enough. So for John, loving one another was of paramount importance for us in our Christian walk in life. But on the other hand, he also cared about the truth. Jerome tells of another story where John would often go to a local Roman baths to get a wash. And on one occasion, as he was being lowered into the baths, he noticed a false teacher by the name of Cerinthius, who you may recall I mentioned last week, who was a renowned false Gnostic teacher who was teaching basically salvation by works. And as soon as John saw Cerinthius, who was, again, this false teaching, he said, let's fly, lest the bathhouse fall on us, because of Cerinthius, the enemy of the truth is within. And in that moment, his followers lifted John out of the pool, out of the baths, to take him home that day. You see, John was a man of love, but he also was at the same time a man who cared too much about the truth for it to be compromised. And as followers of Christ, it's very important that we never forget the importance that we never, ever, ever compromise on what is true, but we also at the same time walk in love towards God and towards each other. And so, guys, that's our thought to think about. A question to ponder is this: where might I be, and this is for us to discuss in the life groups, where might I currently be out of balance, leaning more towards truth about love or love about truth? And what would it be like to bring those back into alignment in my daily relationships? That's our question to ponder. A text of study is like you to read 2 John chapter 1, verses 6 to 11. What does John say? What does John say about what it means to walk in love? To walk in love and walk in truth. Okay, so what does John say about what it means to walk in love and walk in truth in this passage? Okay, what warning does John give about deceivers, and how are believers instructed to respond to them? Why do you think John connects love and truth so closely rather than treating them as separate qualities? How can you practically show love to others while still holding firmly to the truth of Christ in real life situations? So, guys, I hope tonight you got something out of that. Hey, and listen, if you've enjoyed that, why not give a thumbs up? Why not share the message? Why not subscribe to this channel if you like to continue to get updates on our regular Bible studies? Hey, listen, have a great rest of the week. Looking forward to seeing you over the weekend. And God bless you all. And by the way, next week, I'm gonna have once a month. I'm gonna have Philip Dring just bringing you something, a part of a Bible study, the first Tuesday of the month. But also, our next unit we're going to be looking at is the Book of Revelation as we continue our new creation story. Hey, have a great rest of the week, guys. God bless you all. See you later.